Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Cara Lennan, a fertility energetics coach and mother of two. She was told she would never conceive with her own eggs, and through energy work, nervous system reprogramming, and feminine embodiment, she conceived against all odds at age 35 and 37. Cara now supports women in optimizing their fertility by uncovering, dissolving, and healing the blocks that stands between them and their baby. So Cara is a colleague and friend of mine. We both recently completed a womb embodiment certification together. And in this episode, we'll be diving into how she went from quote unquote infertile to conceiving naturally twice with energetics and womb work, and how she supports women to do the same now. So welcome, Cara. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. And I love to just dive right in. Where did your fertility journey begin, and what did that look like for you?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you again. So my fertility journey started when I was 33. I had met the man that I knew I was going to have my babies with. We actually went to high school together. We weren't together in high school, but we always fancied each other. And then we both went off and explored the world and did lots of traveling and came back together and met again at 31. So at 33, we decided to start trying to conceive. And I was doing all the things. I was doing the tracking, I was using the ovulation predictor kits. I was like doing it all. I had the app, I had the sticks, had my diary out every day. It was very planned and doing all the things. And 6 months went by and it was crickets. So obviously they say to give it a year, but I just felt like something was off. And so I went to my doctor, got some initial tests, and he immediately referred me to a fertility specialist. He just told me that my FSH was high, didn't want to go into any more detail with me, didn't tell me what that meant or how that would impact my fertility, just told me that I needed to go and see a specialist. So as you can imagine, I then Googled the shit out of that diagnosis and was like, what does this mean? Oh my God. And had some further testing done by a fertility specialist and received the results that I had basically premature ovarian insufficiency. So I had really high FSH. It was like mid-20s, pretty high, and very low AMH. So I was told that I probably would not conceive with my own eggs and that I didn't have many eggs left. The quality of the eggs that I did have was no good, and that egg donor was probably my best bet. Obviously, this was like, I was just so blindsided by this diagnosis. And the first thing I asked her was, what can I do to improve my fertility? And the words that came out of her mouth was nothing really. And I was just shocked. I just was like, that can't be true. There must be something that I can do. And she gave me all the statistics and the percentages of, I had a less than 1% chance of conceiving naturally. And she told me that IVF wasn't even a good option for me because I wouldn't be a good candidate because my chances of conceiving with IVF was so low. But she said to me we could do some IUIs in the meantime while I get my head around the egg donor situation. as you can imagine, I spent the next few months being more intense about my fertility situation and going even more restricted on my food and taking more supplements and seeing more people. And it just became this panicked situation. I felt like I was this ticking time bomb, and I felt desperate. I had been given this diagnosis and I just felt completely desperate. I felt like I didn't know where to go, who to go to, what to do. So I just did it all. I just did it all. And after about 3 months of doing it all and doing it all perfectly and doing all the things, I hit burnout. I do have a very sensitive nervous system, and I just completely hit burnout emotionally and physically and mentally. And I just had this aha moment that this was not going to be the way that I would conceive my children. Why would my child, who I believed was looking down, spirit babies, I do believe in spirit babies, and I felt like, why would my baby want to come into my life right now when I am a like panicked mess? So I really took that moment to really, I guess, go inward as opposed to looking at all of these outward things that I was doing, and really take stock of what all those doing things was doing to my nervous system and doing to my relationship and doing to my life and my mindset. And I really changed my trajectory at that stage and started doing some work with a fertility coach who really guided me through the inner work that I actually needed to really address and release and come face to face with. That actually was the inner work that would, as a result of that, the byproduct of that inner work was actually a regulated nervous system, my hormones balanced. I'm not going to say they were perfect because they weren't, but they definitely shifted. I felt better. I came out of burnout. I felt hopeful for once. And I just knew that my babies were coming. There was no question about it. It was just a matter of when, not if. And it was like night and day, the kind of U-turn that I took on my fertility journey. So I spent a couple of months with this fertility coach. I decided to really just let go of all of the trying, right? All of that pressure and the apps and the timing and all of that stuff. I decided if I wanted to have some drinks with my girlfriends, I would. If I wanted to have takeout one night, I would do that. But also, of course, I'm focusing on nourishing my body and getting good sleep and just living a balanced life. And I decided to take 6 months off of all of that trying and go into my first IUI after I had that 6 months of the inner work and being supported by a coach and really changing the way that I was approaching my fertility. So after 6 months, I went ahead and did an IUI, my first IUI, and I had a 6% chance of that working. And I conceived my first son with that IUI. I was like, wow, this, not that I didn't believe, but it just really proved to me that there absolutely is something that I can do to improve my fertility. And it doesn't come from all the doing, it actually came from how I was being and the kind of release and healing work that I did in my inner environment. So that was my first baby, and he was born when I was 35. And I will say that I did fall back into my patterns a little bit after I had Jude. I'd been in my wounded masculine perfectionism, A type, overachieving type way for 35 years. So I started to creep back in because I really wanted to have a sibling for my son. And I had been told by my specialist, if you want another baby, you better get onto it quickly because, as far as she was concerned, I was a ticking time bomb. And 6 months after Jude was born, I finished breastfeeding, which I wish that I hadn't done that. But anyway, that's what I did at the time. And sort of raced into doing some more IUIs, to be totally honest with you. I slipped back into the old patterns, and I did 4 IUIs over the space of the next probably 9 months or so, and they all failed. And again, I took a moment to just sort of reflect on, what did I do last time that I'm not doing this time? And the key piece was that inner work, that connection back to myself, the getting back into my body, letting go of all this perfectionist and doing and action taking and just this frenzy of all of the doing. And so I went back to my fertility coach that I'd been seeing. She lived locally, spent another couple of months with her, and decided to take another 6 month break, if you will, of just all of that really pressured trying in the lead up to another IUI. And 3 months into that 6 month break, I conceived naturally at 37. I'd been given a less than 1% chance of that happening and had been told that I need donor eggs, and here I was conceiving naturally at 37. Yeah, it's just, I still, when I tell that story, get goosebumps because it's like this work is so powerful, and I just wish that more women knew about it, which is hence the work that you and I do now, because there is so much more that you can do with your fertility. And I think we've been led to believe that we don't have power over our fertility when actually we have so much more influence on it than we even realize.
I don't think I've ever actually heard your full story before. I had an idea, but that is really just a beautiful reflection. And you wrapped it up so nicely with we've been led to believe we have no power and control. And it's so common to hear that there is nothing you can do, or these are your only options. And so many of us believe that, right? We
Yeah.
take that on as our truth, but it is not. So I love that. And it definitely gives me goosebumps as well because it just shows you what is absolutely possible. And I think like because there's so much I could comment on and everything you shared, but we'd be here all day. I feel like the theme that is coming to my mind is awareness, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Twice you had this aha moment with yourself where it's like, what am I even doing? And it's so easy for us to get swept away in just all of this doing and chaos and just not even realizing like we are so unconsciously doing these things. So the key is just this self-awareness, which I feel like is something that you and I really help women tune up, so to say, or like tap into. And that's when you have these major changes. And even after doing it the first time, right, you veered off a little bit, went into old
Hmm.
habits, and that's where we can be okay with that. We don't have to be perfect all the time and have self-compassion and just tap back into that awareness and decide. We get to decide, how do I want to show up on my
Yeah.
journey? So I think that was something that I really, really resonated with and that stood out with me about your journey. It's beautiful, beautiful. And I'm curious, so you said your labs got better, but not like amazing. Did you ever
Mm.
have your FSH and your AMH retested?
I did. I mean, after they retested my FSH over the first few months because it was so high, they were like, is this right? Let's retest for a few months. And then it got to a stage where they were like, there is no point in retesting because what they said to me was, you are only as good as your worst number,
Oh.
which is just such
Okay.
a negative way to look at things and especially to share that with your client. They did retest my AMH and my AMH actually went down. So my AMH actually got worse between 35 to 37. My numbers went down considerably. So my FSH was bouncing around, but just in terms of like my thyroid was back on track because I had some thyroid issues. My nervous system was more regulated. There was other hormonal, what can I say, markers, I guess, where I knew that I was in a better place within my body. But I don't know where my FSH was at when I conceived at 37. It would be really interesting to know that actually. But my AMH actually went down. So I conceived at 35 with an AMH that was already low. And then it went down by, I'd say, probably another 60 to 70% by the time I was 37. But that's when I conceived naturally. And so it just goes to show that all of these blood tests are just like a snapshot in time. And even when we have low AMH, we usually still have thousands of eggs left. Yes, we might be below the average of another woman of our particular age, but we probably still have thousands of eggs left. And yes, some of our eggs may not be great quality, but there's still going to be eggs in there that are great quality. That's my way of looking at it, that we're not bound by these results. They are a snapshot in time. And the inner work that we can do, the beautiful byproduct of that inner work is the fact that your nervous system completely regulates, your hormones start to balance. I mean, I was getting hot flushes even before I was trying to conceive my first child. And I was able to completely reverse that. There's other ways that we can feel into that our body is responding and that we're heading in the right direction. And as a female, we have this gift of being able to be in our body and pick up on those signs and sensations. But when we are just in our head and we're just looking at the numbers and all the stats, I think that is when we get more dysregulated and more depleted, because we're in that wounded masculine, overthinking, overanalyzing, what's the logical next step, when really the decision should be based on what feels good to your body. When I said to my specialist, I'm taking 6 months off, she gave me the side eye, like, what do you think you're doing? But I just knew that was the right choice for me. No matter what the person in the white coat was telling me, who is the expert, I knew my body and it was telling me that this was what I needed. And I think that's some of the work that we do as well, is that, to be in our feminine is really about tapping back into all these resources that we have access to that we just haven't tapped into because we've been so conditioned to lead with the mind, do what's sensible, be logical, and achieve at all costs, and basically run our lives like a man. And we've just been so tapped out of all of these feminine gifts. And I believe that's where all the magic lies, is actually just tapping back into all these feminine gifts that we have.
Absolutely, 100%. So, when did you decide I want to help other women achieve this for themselves as well and tap back into their feminine and really be able to be one with their intuition and their inner resources?
Mm. I mean, I knew as soon as I conceived Jude, when that was just against all odds, I knew in that moment I wanted to do this kind of work. I just didn't know what that would look like. And then when I conceived and birthed my second baby, and I had a home birth, and before this kind of work, I was like the girl that was like, give me the epidural, I don't want to feel anything, or give me a cesarean, I don't care. I went from that girl to literally a home birth. This is the kind of like the power of this work, right? It actually changes who we are being in our life. So I always wanted to get into this work. I didn't know what that looked like. I had two little kids at home. I was working part-time. So when COVID hit and all that crazy stuff was happening, that's when I think a lot of us started thinking a lot deeper about a lot of things. And that was when I was like, what am I doing? Why am I making this money for these other people? I know what my true passion is. Now is the time to actually make this happen. And so that was a real turning point for me, was during the COVID epidemic, to really rethink my life and my priorities. And that became a real turning point for me to be like, this is the time. This is the time. It felt right. I had capacity because we were working from home. And I just knew that this was still my calling and it was still my passion, and it's what so many women still needed support with. So that's how it all kind of started.
I love that. And I think it just goes to show that things happen in our life to really show us where we can heal, where we can do better, to step into the version of ourselves that we're here and on this earth at this very time to be. And I think for you and me, our fertility journeys played a very like a mind awakening role for us to be like, okay, what's going on? Healing ourselves, having this like transcendence awakening, and then moving forward to helping others. I mean, I literally went from working as a retail pharmacist to coaching fertility clients and couples and in employing energetics and womb work. Like, definitely did not see that coming like I guess I can't say 5 years ago, probably 7 years ago would be a fair response. But it's just beautiful to see how we can evolve as humans. And it's absolutely possible. Like you said, before you would have been like, give me the epidural. And then you had a home birth. Like, that is powerful. That's not just, oh, I'm going to, have a natural birth in a hospital. Like, that's a complete 180. So I would love to hear how you support women who are probably most likely similar to how you were being in your fertility journey, heavily in their wounded masculine, perfectionism, really that type A overachieving, doing. Using our 4-step restorative fertility framework, we will 1, reveal the physical and energetic root cause. 2, we will remove the barriers to you conceiving and carrying a pregnancy to term. Number 3, we will rebalance the physical and energetic body with bio-individual strategies. And number 4, receive. You will nourish the mind, body, and spirit so you can receive baby. I have 3 one-on-one spots, and this is for the woman who is ready to claim her fertility back. She's ready to step back into her power. She is ready to do what it takes to finally get pregnant. If you want to learn more about this, find me on Instagram at @the_wellness_pharmacist. My Instagram is going to be in the show notes.
Yeah, and look, I would say 99.9% of my clients are in their wounded masculine, and they are all, and they would, hands up, they would say, yes, I'm a perfectionist, I'm an A-type, I'm an overachiever, I've always valued success, I view my value on how successful I am, I'm a go-getter, I work hard, all of those things that you just mentioned. So the way that I support my clients is really, first and foremost, and it's the foundational step that I take with all of my clients, and it's really just getting out of our head and back into our body. This is like the foundation to everything else that I do with my clients. But we need to first be able to even just be in our body and feel safe to be in our body, because when we are in our wounded masculine and we put all of this value on what's logical, what makes sense, what can I do to be successful, the pushing, the forcing, the hustling, all that stuff is just so wounded masculine. And it's very much comes from the neck up. And as females, we're not designed that way, right? Males are designed to live from the neck up and very much mind orientated. The female, the way we're designed, is we are meant to lead from the body. And this has just been completely lost through generations and generations, where we've taken on these masculine conditioning of what it means to have value in life. And it's such a simple practice, but it's something that we really need to, as women, get back in touch with our body, because it's only when we're actually in our body where we can access our intuition, where we can access any emotions that we actually need to express that we haven't because we've suppressed them for so long. It's where we get to access and actually be in tune with, okay, what are those signs and symptoms that I'm feeling in my body, right? Because our body can't speak to us in language. It's speaking to us in these subtle signs and sensations that it might be a little niggle and a little whisper at first, but if you don't pay attention to that and you just override that with all of your doing, that's when it becomes a shouting issue and a much bigger hormonal issue or fertility issue. And it seems so simple, and it is, but it's actually so hard for so many women who've lived from the neck up their entire lives to actually just be in their body, because this is where the wisdom is held, this is where our intuition is held, this is the way the feminine body has been designed, this is how we access our feminine energy. And it also is a really grounding way to be, right? When we're up in our head, we're very flighty, we're not grounded, everything's stressful and pressured. When we ground our energy back down into our body, which is the way that our energy flow should be in the female body, we're actually grounding our energy as well. We're not feeling so here, there, and everywhere with this dysregulated nervous system jumping from one thing to the next to the next. We're actually grounding our energy, which as well is supporting our nervous system. So that's like the absolute foundational practice that I teach with my clients. And I really get my clients to really nail that by doing it like daily for at least a couple of weeks. And only once they feel safe to be in their body and they're starting to pick up on emotions or signs or tension or feelings, and it could be a tightness in their chest or a butterflies in their stomach, whatever it might be, only until they're able to sit there and just be in their body without wanting to jump out of their skin and go and do something productive. Only then would I actually even move on to the other practices that I do inside of my work with my clients, because if we can't be in our body, then we can't access our emotions, we can't access our womb space, we can't really access and tap into really that inner trauma or programming or conditioning that as a child has become like stuck in our body as energy. We can't really even access that if we can't be in our body, right? It all lives in the body. So I start with that, and then we work on like womb healing, subconscious reprogramming, emotional release, work around trauma as well, because as you and I know, trauma doesn't have to be this big T trauma, although of course it is as well. Trauma could literally just be growing up in a household where dad was an alcoholic, mum was a workaholic, we had a sibling that bullied us, or there was a lot of arguing in the household. It doesn't have to be the big T stuff that we necessarily think of. So we work on releasing that from the body, because there is obviously a lot of linkages with trauma and chronic illness, which involves fertility as well. And then we really get into the wounded masculine, like really releasing that wounded masculine imprints, which all of my clients have. And from there, we're actually then able to create that safe container within ourselves to bring our feminine energy online. And we really do that at the end of the work that I do with my clients, because we need to like clear out the junk, so to speak. It's clear out our stuff and release it and dissolve it. And then we've got this like beautiful clear channel or vessel to kind of bring our feminine online and feel safe to be in our feminine. So that's a very quick way of saying the kind of work that I do with my clients.
Absolutely. So if someone is like being in my body, what is that? What does that feel like? How can I start doing that? Do you have one tip that someone can start implementing today just to get a feel of what that could
Yeah.
be?
If I was to give someone one tip on getting into their body, it would be to give yourself 5 minutes, just even 5 minutes a day, when you are not distracted, when you have some time alone, where you just sit for 5 minutes and just close your eyes and bring your awareness into your body. And I would also say to really, when you're doing this, because when we ground into our body, we have no other option but to be in the present moment, right? So it's really about, what are my five senses picking up on here as well? This is a great way to ground ourselves into our body. As we close our eyes, we're trying to bring our awareness into our body. What am I feeling? What am I sensing? What am I smelling? What am I hearing? And then also to go deeper within the body, just trying to pick up on like, where am I feeling? Is there any tension in my body? Have I got my shoulders clenched up to my ears, which is a very common one? Am I feeling like I've got a tightness in my stomach? Because so many women just don't let their stomach out, right? We're conditioned to hold it in, and that creates tension in the body. Do I have a tight jaw? Do I have my teeth clenched? Like really just almost doing like a body scan and just saying like, where do I have tension? And just being with it and just not resisting it, but just allowing it to be there and just becoming curious. It is great to, as we come up to certain points in our body where we do have tension, it's great to just let that go once we become aware of it. Like I know for me, this is one for me, and I'm like, "Ah, I can just let that go." But we don't want to resist anything that comes up. It's just about just being curious. How can I be in my body? How does this feel? Do I feel tension? Can I let that tension go? And if we can't in that moment, that's okay too. Maybe that will come in the next session or the next session. But it's really just about taking the pressure off, sinking that awareness, trying to just sort of bring that awareness down into our body. And the mind will still chatter, especially when we first start this. You will still bounce up into your mind, and you might be a little bit like, oh, but I need to do this and I need to do that. And that is also totally normal. Don't judge yourself for that. But the more you practice this, the more it becomes a practice that you want to do because it just feels so good. It will eventually quiet the mind. It will eventually direct you to where you need to release tension in the body. It will eventually direct you to emotions that you might have stored in the body. So it's really just not overcomplicating it, just being with your body, being with your five senses, and just being really open and curious to what comes up and to not resist anything that comes up. I think that's super important because whatever we resist persists. So just really coming at it with a curious mindset and seeing what comes through. Yeah,
Mhm.
and doing it regularly. I think we can't just do it once, be like, oh, that didn't work for me. I can't be in my body. Someone like that needs to do this work. Just 5 minutes a day. And I would say just do it for 2 weeks, 5 minutes. I know you can spare the time. And it's amazing the shifts you can make in that time because you'll really start to realize what you can actually access within the body.
Absolutely. That was a great tip. Thank you. And what's really nice about what you and I learned in the certification was we also had to go through that exact process in
Mhm.
how you support your clients. So we and you, for your clients, you can speak from experience, right? You are embodied in this work. And like you were saying, you have to keep up with it and not just shut it down because it didn't work or it was super uncomfortable the first time or the first couple of times. It's really a practice for yourself. And I find that things just really start stacking and your awareness just becomes really easy to access. Like I had this moment the other day. It wasn't necessarily like being in my body, so to say, but my awareness peaked. I was washing my face and the water was running. And in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like a really relaxing, bubbling brook. I don't know if I had the water on at just the right speed, but so I stopped for a minute and just closed my eyes and just soaked that sound and that sensation that it brought in my body up. But it's usually, if we're not tapped into our awareness, we would just be plowing through whatever it is that we're trying to get done. So I feel like you really just get to tap into the beauty of life and in yourself too.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you took that time to just be in that present moment. And I think that that's something that, as women, like we just rush through life. We just rushing to the next thing, the next thing to tick off the list, the next achievement. And life is just this big rush. And what are we rushing towards? Like death. It's like why are we rushing every moment of our lives? And I love that point you made because that's something that I've been doing a lot too, is really just slowing down, like even having my morning cup of tea or coffee, just like actually getting pleasure from that hot drink in my hands in the morning. And rather than chugging it down, getting on with my day, it's actually like feeling that warmth in my hands, drinking it slowly, actually enjoying it, like smelling it, like actually feeling that warmth come into my body, and just like these little micro moments that as women we just wouldn't even think twice because we don't have that awareness piece. And we just rush through life, rush through these little micro magical moments that actually could be so much more than they are. And I think that's something else that I talk to my clients about is like just taking pleasure from these tiny micro moments to just sink into our body and be in our feminine by being in the present moment.
hmm
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you've been doing this work. Can you share a success story, possibly?
Yeah, I would love to share a success story. I have a lady in my group at the moment, actually. She's from Ireland and she had a miscarriage. She'd experienced a miscarriage. She had found out she had low AMH. And when she came to me, her and I on our initial call, highly emotional, really struggling with the loss of her baby, really struggling with the diagnosis of low AMH, not sure where to turn to, same kind of feedback as I received that there's nothing you can do. So basically, prepare for IVF. And she just wasn't emotionally ready for that. She had so much more work to do around releasing and processing this loss and for her as well, just getting back into her feminine, getting back into her body, grounding her nervous system, which was completely and utterly dysregulated by everything that had happened with her miscarriage and her diagnosis, but also just from her life in general. She was a busy lady and she worked a busy career in health and in a hospital setting and just was very dysregulated, was very depleted, and emotionally had a lot to really work through. So we worked together. She joined my Fertile Frequency online program, which is a 4-month online group program where I take my clients step by step through a 5-step method that I have to support my clients to optimize their fertility and get their babies into their arms sooner. And so this particular client was so open to everything, one of those like clients that just embraces the work. She just was on all of the calls, she really embraced the work, and she really embraced the theory and what I talk to my clients about, just about that letting go, like letting go of all of the tracking and the doing and the that hypervigilance. And she could really see herself in that. And so she decided to, with a little resistance, she made the decision to just sort of let all of that go for a couple of months and just enjoy life. She had short cycles as well, so she was ovulating quite early, so she was concerned about that. But she just felt there was more pressure with all of the hypervigilance and the tracking, and she decided to just, while she was in this program, give herself just a couple of months. And she decided that if she didn't conceive within the program, she would choose to do IVF, but at least she'd be in a much better place to move into that IVF cycle. And so she had some fun things on at the time, and she went to a friend's wedding, which was overseas, just her and her husband went. And she kicked her heels up and she had a great time and she really just let loose. And she conceived that cycle. Her cycles were like short cycles. I think she was ovulating on day 11, maybe slightly earlier, but she wasn't tracking. So who knows what happened that cycle. But she was having the time of her life. She was not controlling anything. She had a couple of drinks. She was up on stage singing with the bride, having a great time. And as it transpired, that was the cycle that she conceived. So she is, I just was talking to her yesterday. She's had her 12-week scan. She's at 14 weeks now, and she's in that kind of period where she's feeling great and um, just still taking on a lot of the practices that we do inside the program to get her through this time after having that miscarriage. That little fear and worry still pops up. So I'm helping her guide through that. But it just goes to show that things don't need to be perfect in order to conceive.
Hmm,
You know,
that's so
yeah.
amazing. That's so, which
Yeah.
she must have been so surprised when she got that positive.
Yeah, she was. She sent me the photo and she was like, I can't believe this. Oh my God, I'm trying to really stay in my body right now. I'm trying not to freak out, but oh my God. Just happiness with a little bit of freak out mixed in. But yeah, she was really surprised because really she wanted to prepare her body for IVF and just make sure she gave herself the best chance possible, which is what my program does as well. So yeah, she was pleasantly shocked and surprised. Yeah.
So I just have to share. That's exactly what happened to me. My
Oh,
husband,
wow.
I had our a fertility specialist appointment in the books,
Mhm.
and we had a wedding, and we were in different places during my fertile window. So we were just like It's not going to happen. I think I had a bachelorette party. He was maybe fishing. And then later in the month, we had a wedding. So the same thing, just like
Mm.
having fun, not worrying about it, doing our own thing. And then when we got the positive, it was like, what? How
Wow.
did this even happen? So I know that people can really get upset when people are like, just relax.
Mm.
But, I do think that there's a certain tone that can be said in where
Yeah.
it can be like, don't even talk to me. But I do think that there is a lot to say, maybe in different terminology, where releasing, letting go of that pressure and living, right? That was a point that I forgot to bring up about your journey is you decided I'm not gonna worry about this and live my life to conceive, right? I'm gonna live my life for me right now because we
Yeah.
all deserve that. So I love that story.
And I feel like there's a thread here. I feel like there are so many stories like yours and mine and my clients, and this is the time that it happens. And it is those times when you let go and you like release the pressure. And yeah, there is a lot of stories that I hear like this. And I think that is no coincidence. There is that trust, knowing that it's going to happen, the surrender, and that full just surrender, living life like that's going to happen anyway. So you're just living your life for you, having the best life, and all of a sudden you're pregnant. And there's something to be said for that letting go and that surrender and that trust for sure.
Absolutely. So I know you have a freebie for the listeners.
I do. I do.
So tell us about that.
I have I have two free masterclasses. I have my most recent masterclass actually that I released, gosh, a couple of weeks ago now, called Heal the Hustle. Which I highly recommend your listeners tapping into. It's all about this hustle culture of women these days. We feel like we have to hustle and grind our way, not only through life, but then we take that on through our fertility journey. And I really just share from the scientific aspect and the hormonal aspect what that's doing to you hormonally, what it's doing to your nervous system. And then I also share the energetic piece as well and what it's doing to us energetically around conception and receiving and pressure and all those things. So I've had amazing feedback on that masterclass, and that is a freebie for your listeners.
Amazing. So the link for that will be in the show notes and let everyone know where they can find you, connect with you, and learn more.
Okay, amazing. Best place to find me is on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is being fertile underscore with Cara, and my website is caralennan.com.
Beautiful. And those will all be in the show notes as well. Thank you, Cara, so much
Amazing.
for being here. And a random side note, I'm going to New Zealand in a couple weeks. That is where Cara lives. So hopefully we're going to get together, and I'm really excited for that.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me, Katie, and hopefully I'll see you in about a month's time in New Zealand.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.